The overlooked Princess Zara pressed herself against the cold marble wall of the Galactic Council's grand ballroom, watching the sea of alien nobility swirl past her in their elaborate gowns and ceremonial robes. The massive chamber stretched high above, its crystal ceiling showing the stars of 1,000 worlds, each one represented by the beings who mingled below. Tonight was the Grand Assembly, where the most powerful families from across the galaxy gathered to discuss trade agreements, military alliances, and most importantly for someone like Zara, marriage contracts. She was the third daughter of House Viridian, rulers of the mineral-rich Kepler Prime system. Her eldest sister had married into the powerful Draconian Empire, securing vital military protection. Her second sister had wed a crystalline lord, ensuring their family's access to advanced technology. But Zara, at 23 cycles old, she remained unwed, a fact that brought shame to her family name with each passing season. The problem wasn't her appearance. Zara possessed the classic Viridian features that had once been considered beautiful. Pale blue skin that shimmered like starlight, silver hair that cascaded to her waist, and large violet eyes that seemed to hold the depth of space itself. Her father often reminded her that she had been the most sought-after bride in the sector when she was younger. But that was before the incident. 5 years ago, during her first diplomatic mission to the Andromedian courts, Zara had made a terrible mistake. She had spoken out against the proposed slave trade agreements, calling them barbaric and unworthy of civilized species. Her words had been broadcast across the galaxy, and while some praised her courage, the powerful noble houses saw only defiance and poor breeding. A princess who couldn't hold her tongue was not suitable wife material for their sons. Since then, every attempt at courtship had ended in polite rejection. The Cetacean princes found her too emotional. The Silicon lords declared her incompatible with logical thinking. Even the normally desperate methane dukes had passed her over, claiming she lacked the proper submissive qualities expected of a noble wife. Tonight felt like her last chance. Her father, King Aldrich, had spent considerable resources to bring her to this gathering, hoping that the grandeur and political importance of the event might help her find a suitable match. But as the evening wore on, Zara watched potential suitors approach her, engage in brief, polite conversation, and then excuse themselves to pursue more promising prospects. Lord Thaxis of the Insectoid Collective had been the most recent disappointment. He had approached with what passed for enthusiasm among his kind, his compound eyes gleaming with interest. But when she had mentioned her thoughts on expanding educational opportunities across the galaxy, his antennae had drooped with disapproval. Princess Zara, he had clicked in his musical language. Surely such matters are better left to those equipped to handle them. A proper wife should focus on supporting her husband's endeavors, not pursuing her own intellectual pursuits. And with that he had bowed and departed, leaving Zara once again alone by the wall. She watched him now across the room, deep in conversation with Princess Lyra of the gaseous nebula kingdoms. Lyra was everything Zara was not. Quiet, agreeable, and famous for her complete lack of political opinions. She would make someone a perfect traditional wife. Still playing the wallflower, I see. Zara turned to find her cousin, Prince Dex, approaching with 2 glasses of Andromedan wine. His expression was sympathetic but tinged with the exasperation he always showed when discussing her romantic failures. "It's not by choice," Zara replied, accepting the wine gratefully. "But apparently, having opinions makes me unsuitable for marriage." Dex sighed, his own blue skin darkening slightly with concern. As the heir to House Viridian's military forces, he understood politics better than most. "You know, Father is getting desperate. He's been talking about arranging something with the Outer Rim territories." Zara's blood chilled. The Outer Rim was where failed nobles went to disappear. A marriage there would essentially be exile, a way for her family to save face while removing the embarrassment she had become. "He wouldn't," she whispered. "He's already been in talks with Baron Kelth of the asteroid mining guild. The man has been widowed 3 times, and his last wife mysteriously died in a mining accident." The wine turned bitter in Zara's mouth. Baron Kelth was notorious throughout the galaxy for his cruelty and his unusual interest in young wives, who tended to meet untimely ends. Her father couldn't seriously be considering such a match. "There has to be another way," she said, more to herself than to Dex. "Unless a miracle happens tonight, I don't see how." You've alienated every major house, and the minor ones don't have enough political weight to interest father. Before Zara could respond, a commotion near the main entrance caught their attention. The usual musical chatter of the ballroom had shifted to surprised murmurs and whispers. Guests were turning to stare at something or someone who had just arrived. "What's happening?" Zara asked, straining to see over the crowd. Dex, being taller, had a better view. His expression shifted from curiosity to surprise to something that might have been amusement. "Well," he said slowly, "your miracle might have just walked through the door." "What do you mean?" "The human delegation has arrived." Zara felt her heart skip. Humans were relatively new to the galactic political scene, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Their small confederation of worlds was considered a curiosity rather than a real power, and their representatives were rarely taken seriously by the established nobility. But as the crowd parted to allow the human delegation passage into the ballroom, Zara found herself intrigued despite herself. There were 3 of them, dressed in simple but elegant clothing that seemed almost primitive compared to the elaborate costumes around them. Yet something about their bearing, their confidence, set them apart. The leader appeared to be a tall man with dark hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything around him, with genuine interest rather than the calculated assessment she was used to seeing from nobles. Unlike the other species present, who moved with the rigid formality of established hierarchy, the humans walked with an easy grace that suggested they were comfortable in their own skin. "Father will never approve of anything involving the humans," Dex murmured. "They have no real wealth, no military power, and no political influence." But as Zara watched the human delegation navigate the ballroom, she noticed something interesting. While the established nobles maintained their distance, treating the humans with polite but cool acknowledgement, the younger attendees and representatives from smaller worlds seemed drawn to them. There was something refreshing about their lack of pretension, their obvious genuine interest in the conversations they were having. And then, as if sensing her attention, the lead human looked directly at her across the crowded room. Their eyes met, and Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Genuine interest from someone who didn't immediately look away in disappointment or dismissal. Instead, he smiled, a warm expression that reached his eyes and began moving purposefully through the crowd toward her. "Oh no," Dex muttered. "Zara, don't even think about it," but it was too late. For the first time in 5 years, Zara felt hope. An unexpected introduction. Captain Marcus Chen had attended many formal events during his years as Earth's diplomatic liaison, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer spectacle of a Galactic Council Grand Assembly. The ballroom was a marvel of engineering and artistry, with representatives from hundreds of different species creating a tapestry of colors, sounds, and movements that would have been impossible to imagine just a century ago when humanity was still confined to a single world. But despite the overwhelming grandeur, Marcus found himself increasingly uncomfortable with what he was observing. This wasn't just a diplomatic gathering, it was a marketplace. He had watched young nobles being paraded before potential matches like prize livestock, their worth measured in political connections and economic advantages rather than personal compatibility or happiness. "Quite a display," commented Dr. Sarah Kim, his cultural attaché, as they made their way through the crowd. "It's like watching a very expensive auction." "That's exactly what it is," replied Commander James Rodriguez, their security chief, his voice carrying a hint of disgust. "I've been listening to the conversations around us. Half of these courtships are just business transactions with wedding ceremonies attached." Marcus nodded grimly. Earth's delegation had been invited as a courtesy, rather than a serious political consideration. Their small confederation of 12 worlds couldn't compete with the vast empires represented here, but that also gave them a unique perspective. They had nothing to gain from these political marriages, which meant they could observe the proceedings with clear eyes, and what Marcus saw troubled him deeply. The established nobles moved through the ballroom like predators, calculating the value of each potential alliance. The younger generation, particularly the women, seemed trapped in a system that valued their political utility over their personhood. He had watched several promising conversations end abruptly when a young person expressed an opinion that didn't align with traditional expectations. It reminded him of Earth's own dark history, when marriages among the wealthy and powerful had been arranged for political gain rather than love or compatibility. Humanity had moved beyond such practices, but it seemed the galaxy's elite had embraced them wholeheartedly. "Captain," Dr. Kim said quietly, nodding toward a group of elderly aliens deep in heated discussion. "I've been monitoring the conversation between the Draconian ambassador and that crystalline lord. They're negotiating a marriage contract for their children who haven't even met yet." Marcus shook his head. The more he learned about galactic noble society, the less impressed he became with their supposed sophistication. That's when he noticed her. Standing against the far wall, partially hidden by a massive pillar, was a young woman who seemed completely disconnected from the political theater surrounding her. Unlike the other nobles who were actively networking and positioning themselves for advantage, she appeared to be observing the proceedings with the same mixture of fascination and dismay that Marcus himself felt. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow with its own inner light, and silver hair that caught the ballroom's illumination like spun starlight. But what caught his attention wasn't her appearance, it was her expression. While everyone else wore carefully crafted masks of political neutrality or calculated interest, her face showed genuine emotion. Sadness, frustration, and something that looked like resignation. "Who is that?" he asked Dr. Kim, who was scanning the crowd with the analytical eye of an anthropologist. Kim followed his gaze and consulted the small device that contained profiles of the major attendees. Princess Zara of House Viridian, third daughter of King Aldrich, rulers of the Kepler Prime system, significant mineral wealth and strategic positioning. She should be one of the most sought-after matches here. Should be. According to the briefing materials, she's been unwed for 5 years despite multiple courtship attempts. That's unusual for someone of her rank and family wealth. There must be some kind of scandal or complication. Marcus studied the princess more carefully. As he watched, a tall insectoid alien approached her, engaged in what appeared to be a brief conversation, then departed with obvious dismissal. The princess's shoulders sagged slightly and she seemed to shrink further into herself. Something about the entire scene struck him as fundamentally wrong. Here was someone who should have been celebrating at what was clearly an important social event, instead standing alone and apparently unwanted. "I'm going to introduce myself," Marcus announced. Both of his companions looked at him in surprise. "Captain," Commander Rodriguez said carefully, "our mission here is to observe and learn about galactic political structures. Getting involved in the personal drama of alien nobility doesn't seem advisable. Neither does ignoring someone who appears to be in distress," Marcus replied. "Besides, we're supposed to be building relationships and understanding different cultures. What better way than direct conversation?" Dr. Kim looked thoughtful. "It could provide valuable insights into the social dynamics we're observing. But be careful. There may be cultural protocols we're not aware of." Marcus was already moving through the crowd, using the skills he'd developed during years of diplomatic work to navigate between conversations without causing disruption. As he drew closer to Princess Zara, he could see that she was even younger than he had initially thought, probably no more than her early 20s in human terms. She was speaking quietly with a male alien who shared her blue-tinged features, likely a family member based on the resemblance. Their conversation appeared serious, possibly distressing, and Marcus found himself hesitating. Perhaps this wasn't the right moment for an introduction from a stranger, but then the princess looked up, and their eyes met across the remaining distance between them. Marcus had attended enough formal events to become skilled at reading social cues, and what he saw in Princess Zara's expression surprised him. Instead of the polite dismissal he expected from someone clearly dealing with personal matters, he saw curiosity, even interest. More importantly, he saw intelligence, a sharp awareness that seemed to take his measure in the space of a heartbeat. He smiled. The genuine expression that Sarah always told him was his greatest diplomatic asset, and continued his approach. The male alien, her cousin, based on the family resemblance, noticed his approach first. The alien's expression shifted to one of protective wariness, and he moved slightly to position himself between Marcus and the princess. "Your Highness," Marcus said, offering the formal bow that Dr. Kim had drilled into him during their preparation. "I am Captain Marcus Chen, representing the United Earth Confederation. I hope I'm not interrupting." Princess Zara stepped forward, apparently curious enough to override her cousin's protective instincts. Captain Chen, welcome to the Grand Assembly. I must admit I wasn't aware that Earth had sent a delegation. Her voice was musical, with an accent that reminded Marcus of wind chimes, but her grasp of standard galactic was flawless. More importantly, she spoke to him directly, making eye contact and engaging in actual conversation, rather than the stilted formal exchanges he had observed elsewhere in the ballroom. "We're honored to be included," Marcus replied. "Though I'll admit this is all quite overwhelming for someone from a relatively young spacefaring civilization." "I imagine it would be," the princess said, and Marcus caught something that might have been amusement in her tone. "The Grand Assembly can be overwhelming even for those of us who grew up in this world." Her cousin cleared his throat pointedly. "Zara, perhaps we should return to father. He was expecting—" "Let me introduce my cousin, Prince Dex," Princess Zara interrupted smoothly. "Dex, Captain Chen represents one of the newer additions to the galactic community." Prince Dex's expression remained politely neutral, but Marcus sensed disapproval beneath the surface. Whether it was directed at him personally or at the situation in general wasn't clear. "Captain Chen," Marcus said, addressing the prince directly, "I hope I haven't violated any protocols by introducing myself. I'm still learning about galactic diplomatic customs." "Not at all," Princess Zara answered before her cousin could respond. "In fact, it's refreshing to meet someone who approaches conversation directly, rather than through intermediaries and formal negotiations." The comment seemed pointed, and Marcus wondered if it related to whatever had caused her current social isolation. Before he could explore the thought further, the ballroom's lighting shifted, and a melodious tone indicated that some kind of formal presentation was about to begin. "The announcement ceremony," Prince Dex explained, though his tone suggested he found the proceedings as tiresome as Marcus did. "Various houses will present their eligible children and announce new engagements." Marcus watched as Princess Zara's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Clearly, this wasn't something she was looking forward to. "Would you care to observe the ceremony together?" Marcus asked impulsively. "I'm afraid I don't understand most of the cultural significance, and I could use someone to help me navigate the subtleties." It was a transparent excuse, but Princess Zara's face brightened with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. "I would be happy to provide commentary," she said. The announcement ceremony. The central floor of the ballroom cleared as the announcement ceremony began, and Zara found herself standing beside Captain Chen at the edge of the gathering crowd. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely engaged with the proceedings rather than simply enduring them. "Each family will present their eligible children," she explained quietly as the first group took the floor. "The parents announce their accomplishments, their suitability for marriage, and any pending engagements." Marcus nodded, watching with the intense focus she had noticed in him since their introduction. Unlike most beings she had met, he seemed genuinely interested in understanding rather than simply judging. "The crystalline heirs," Zara continued as a group of beings that looked like living gemstones arranged themselves in formation. Their leader, a towering figure whose body contained swirling galaxies of light, began to speak in a voice that resonated like crystal bells. "My daughter Lumina has achieved mastery of quantum mathematics and stellar engineering," the patriarch announced. "She has completed diplomatic training with the Andromedian courts and speaks 17 galactic languages. She will bring honor to any house fortunate enough to unite with ours." The crowd murmured approval as Lumina stepped forward, her crystalline body catching and refracting the ballroom's light into rainbow patterns. She was undeniably beautiful and clearly accomplished. "What happens if no one makes an offer tonight?" Marcus asked. "The family continues negotiations privately, usually through intermediaries, but public presentations like this can increase interest and create competitive bidding situations." As if to prove her point, several young nobles stepped forward to request formal introduction to Lumina, their families clearly seeing potential advantage in the alliance. "It's very efficient," Marcus observed, though his tone suggested he didn't necessarily approve of the efficiency. The ceremony continued with house after house presenting their children like prized possessions. The Draconian Empire showcased a young prince whose military accomplishments included the successful conquest of 3 minor systems, The gaseous nebula kingdoms presented twin daughters whose psychic abilities had been tested and certified by the Galactic Mental Arts Council. With each presentation, Zara felt the weight of her own failure more keenly. She should have been up there years ago, celebrated for her diplomatic training and political education. Instead, she remained in the audience, a cautionary tale of what happened when a noble child forgot their place. Princess Lyra of the gaseous nebula kingdoms, the announcer's voice rang out. Trained in meditative arts, skilled in domestic management, and certified in conflict avoidance by the Peaceful Resolution Institute. Zara watched as Lyra glided forward, her gaseous form shimmering with practiced serenity. She embodied everything the noble houses valued in a bride: beauty, accomplishment, and most importantly, complete deference to authority. "She's beautiful," Marcus commented. "She's perfect," Zara replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Never had an independent thought in her life, never questioned a decision made by her superiors, never caused her family a moment of embarrassment. Marcus looked at her curiously. "You sound like you speak from experience." Zara realized she had revealed more than she intended, but something about the human's straightforward manner encouraged honesty. 5 years ago, I was considered as promising a match as Lyra. My family expected me to marry well and secure important alliances for House Viridian. What changed? Before Zara could answer, the announcer called out, "Baron Kelth of the Asteroid Mining Guild requests the honor of presenting his qualifications to Princess Lyra's family." Zara's blood chilled as she watched Baron Kelth step forward. He was a massive being, even by Outer Rim standards, with scarred metallic skin and eyes like black holes. His presence seemed to suck warmth from the surrounding air. 50 mining stations across 17 systems, he announced in a voice like grinding gears. Annual output valued at 12 billion credits, seeking a young bride to provide heirs and manage domestic affairs. The crowd's reaction was notably muted. Everyone knew Baron Kelth's reputation, but his wealth made him impossible to ignore entirely. "He's been rejected by every major house for the past decade," Zara whispered to Marcus. "There are rumors about what happened to his previous wives." Marcus studied the Baron with obvious distaste. He looks like the kind of man who considers wives property. In the Outer Rim, they essentially are. As if sensing their attention, Baron Kelth's black gaze swept across the crowd and fixed on Zara. His expression shifted to one of predatory interest, and he began moving in their direction. "Princess Zara," he said when he reached them, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Your father and I have been discussing potential arrangements." Zara felt the familiar wave of helplessness that had plagued her for years. But this time, something was different. This time, she wasn't alone. "Baron Kelth," Marcus said smoothly, stepping slightly forward in a movement that wasn't quite protective but sent a clear message. "I don't believe we've been introduced. Captain Marcus Chen, United Earth Confederation." The Baron's attention shifted to Marcus with obvious irritation. "Human. I wasn't aware your species had been granted speaking privileges at these proceedings." "We're still learning galactic customs," Marcus replied pleasantly, but Zara caught the steel beneath his polite tone. "On Earth, it's considered rude to interrupt a conversation without being invited to join." The insult was so smoothly delivered that Baron Kelth almost missed it. When he did understand, his metallic features darkened with anger. "Customs vary greatly across the galaxy, human. In some regions, outsiders who overstep their bounds face serious consequences." "I'm sure they do," Marcus agreed. "Fortunately, we're currently under the protection of Galactic Council protocols, which guarantee the safety and dignity of all invited delegates." It was a masterful response that used Baron Kelth's own adherence to legal frameworks against him. The Baron couldn't threaten a formally invited delegate without violating council law. "Princess Zara," Baron Kelth said, turning back to her, but clearly frustrated by Marcus's intervention, "I trust we'll have opportunity to discuss our family's arrangement privately." "Actually," Zara said, surprising herself with her boldness, "I'm committed to serving as Captain Chen's cultural guide for the remainder of the evening. Perhaps we could schedule a conversation at a more appropriate time." It was a polite deflection, but both men understood it as the rejection it was. Baron Kelth's expression turned murderous, but before he could respond, the announcement ceremony reached its climax. Houses presenting engagement announcements, the herald called out. One by one, families stepped forward to announce successful matches. The crystalline heirs had secured an alliance with the Silicon Lords. The Draconian prince would marry an Andromedan duchess. Each announcement brought cheers and celebration as political and economic alliances were formalized. But as the announcements continued, Zara noticed something concerning. Every successful engagement involved houses that had been carefully negotiated in advance. There were no surprises, no spontaneous connections, nothing that suggested personal choice had played any role in the proceedings. It's all been predetermined, she murmured to Marcus. What do you mean? Look at the patterns. These aren't marriages based on tonight's interactions. They're business mergers that have been months or years in the making. This entire ceremony is just theater. Marcus watched more carefully as the remaining announcements were made, and Zara saw understanding dawn in his expression. So if someone wanted to make an actual choice based on personal compatibility, he said slowly, they would be going against the entire system. Exactly. Which is why. Zara stopped, realizing she had been about to confess the details of her own disgrace. Which is why you're here, unattached despite being beautiful, intelligent, and from a powerful family. Marcus finished gently. The fact that he had figured out so much from their brief interaction should have alarmed her. Instead, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The relief of being understood. Captain Chen, she said impulsively, would you like to step out onto the observation deck? The view of the starfield is quite remarkable, and it might be easier to talk without the crowd. It was a bold invitation, one that would certainly be noticed and commented upon. But as Baron Kelth continued to glare at them from across the room, and the parade of predetermined engagements continued, Zara realized she didn't care anymore about appearances. For the first time in 5 years, someone was treating her like a person rather than a political asset. And that feeling was worth any amount of scandal. Stars and confessions. The observation deck of the Galactic Council station offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding star field, but Marcus found himself more interested in watching Princess Zara as she moved to the railing, away from the ballroom's political theater. She seemed to shed some of the careful composure he had noticed earlier, her shoulders relaxing as she breathed in the recycled air that carried hints of ozone and starlight. Better? He asked, joining her at the railing. Much, she admitted. Sometimes I think I prefer the company of stars to most sentient beings. Marcus followed her gaze out to the infinite tapestry of lights stretching in every direction. I understand that feeling. There's something honest about space. Stars don't pretend to be something they're not for political advantage. Zara glanced at him with surprise. That's a remarkably poetic observation from a military officer. Who says military officers can't appreciate poetry? Marcus smiled. Though I should clarify, I'm primarily a diplomat. The captain's rank comes from my time in Earth's Space Corps, but these days I spend more time in conference rooms than starships. And do you prefer diplomacy to military service? Marcus considered the question seriously. Both have their place. Military action is sometimes necessary to protect people who can't protect themselves. But diplomacy offers the possibility of solving problems without violence, of finding solutions that benefit everyone involved. Idealistic perspective, Zara observed, though her tone suggested admiration rather than criticism. Perhaps. But idealism has served humanity well in our expansion into the galaxy. We may not have the military might of the Draconian Empire or the economic power of the Crystalline Lords, but we've built alliances based on mutual respect and shared benefit. Zara was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. That's what I tried to argue for 5 years ago. Mutual respect and shared benefit. Marcus waited, sensing that she was ready to share the story she had been holding back. There was a proposal before the Andromedian courts, she continued. Several major houses wanted to formalize the slave trade, create official markets for sentient beings from conquered worlds. The economic advantages were enormous, cheap labor, expanded production, increased profits for everyone involved except the slaves themselves. And you spoke against it? I did more than speak against it. I gave a formal address to the full assembly, broadcast across the galaxy. I called it barbaric. I said that any species advanced enough to achieve interstellar travel should be advanced, enough to recognize the fundamental rights of sentient beings. Zara's voice grew stronger as she recounted her words. I argued that true civilization meant protecting the weak rather than exploiting them. Marcus felt a surge of admiration. That was incredibly brave. It was incredibly stupid, Zara corrected, though she didn't sound like she regretted it. My words went viral, as you humans say. For a brief moment I had support from younger generations across dozens of worlds, but the established power structure saw only a threat to their profits and their authority. What happened next? The proposal was withdrawn quietly and without explanation. But every major house made note of the princess who had disrupted their plans. No one wanted to ally their family with someone who might someday speak out against their interests. Marcus processed this information, understanding now why Princess Zara had been relegated to social exile despite her obvious intelligence and political value. So you were punished for having a conscience. I was punished for forgetting my place, Zara said. A noble daughter's job is to support her family's interests, not to develop independent moral positions that might conflict with profitable arrangements. And your family, how did they react? Zara's expression darkened. My father was furious. He had spent years building relationships that I damaged in a single afternoon. My mother stopped speaking to me entirely for 6 months. They made it clear that I had brought shame to House Viridian and that I needed to find a way to redeem myself through marriage. But no one would have you. No one from the established houses. And my father won't consider alliances with minor families or newer civilizations. He says it would be beneath our station. Marcus thought about Baron Kelth's earlier comments about arrangements between their families. Is that why the Baron was discussing arrangements with your father? Zara's composure cracked slightly. Baron Kelth is my father's backup plan. If I can't secure a proper alliance, he's prepared to marry me off to the Outer Rim to at least gain some financial benefit from my disgrace. The casual way she spoke about being traded like property made Marcus's jaw clench. And you would accept that? I don't have much choice in the matter. Galactic law recognizes a father's authority over unmarried daughters. Unless someone of sufficient status formally requests my hand, I remain under his control. Marcus stared out at the stars, processing the implications. Someone of sufficient status. It would have to be someone from a recognized noble house or someone representing a significant political entity, Zara explained. And they would have to be able to offer something my father values more than Baron Kelth's credits. They stood in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Marcus spoke. What if there was another option? I'm not sure what you mean. Marcus turned to face her fully. Princess Zara, in my brief observation of tonight's proceedings, I've seen a system that reduces people to political and economic calculations. I've watched young people being traded like commodities, their personal happiness and individual worth completely discounted. That's how galactic politics works, Captain. It's been this way for thousands of years. But it doesn't have to be, Marcus said with growing conviction. On Earth, we've learned that societies built on mutual respect and individual freedom are stronger and more prosperous than those built on exploitation and rigid hierarchy. Zara looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time for someone to challenge the system again, but this time with enough support to make it stick. Before Zara could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted their conversation. Prince Dex emerged onto the observation deck, his expression tense with urgency. Zara, you need to return to the ballroom immediately, he said. Father is looking for you, and Baron Kelth has been spreading rumors about your absence with the human delegation. What kind of rumors? Marcus asked. Dex glanced at him uncomfortably. The kind that could be used to force a hasty marriage to preserve honor. Baron Kelth is claiming that leaving the ballroom unchaperoned constitutes inappropriate behavior, that damages your reputation. Zara's face went pale. He's creating a scandal to force my father's hand. Exactly, and it's working. Father is furious, and several other houses are expressing concern about the propriety of human involvement in galactic noble affairs. Marcus felt a surge of anger at the manipulation, but also a strange sense of opportunity. Prince Dex, hypothetically speaking, what would happen if someone were to make a formal marriage proposal to Princess Zara tonight? Both aliens stared at him in shock. Marcus, Zara whispered, what are you saying? I'm saying that maybe Baron Kelth isn't the only one who can play political games. Marcus looked directly at Zara, his expression serious but kind. The question is whether you trust me enough to find out what happens when humans decide to challenge the established order. In the distance, they could hear Baron Kelth's voice rising in the ballroom, clearly building his case for immediate action. Whatever decision they made, it had to be made quickly. Zara looked out at the stars one more time, then back at Marcus. For the first time in 5 years, she smiled with genuine hope. Captain Chen, I believe I would very much like to see what happens when humans challenge the established order. The proposal. Marcus took a deep breath as they prepared to return to the ballroom, knowing that what happened next would change everything. The weight of the decision settled on his shoulders, but when he looked at Princess Zara's face, hopeful for the first time since he'd met her, he felt certain of his choice. Before we go back in there, he said, I need you to understand something. If I do this, if I make a formal proposal, it won't be a political arrangement. It won't be a business transaction. Zara looked at him questioningly. What do you mean? I mean that humans have a different approach to marriage. We believe it should be based on mutual respect, shared values, and the possibility of genuine affection. If you accept my proposal, it would be with the understanding that I would never treat you as property or demand your complete submission. Prince Dex looked skeptical. Captain, I appreciate your intentions, but you're asking Zara to bet her entire future on a species you've known for a few hours. What guarantee do you have that your human customs would protect her? It was a fair question, and Marcus addressed it seriously. You're right that we haven't known each other long. But in the past few hours, I've learned more about Princess Zara's character, intelligence, and moral courage than most of these nobles have bothered to discover in 5 years of negotiations. He turned to Zara directly. I've seen you stand alone rather than compromise your principles. I've watched you show genuine concern for the welfare of beings you've never met. I've observed your intelligence and your capacity for independent thought. Marcus paused, meeting her eyes. Those are exactly the qualities I would want in a partner. But what about love? Zara asked softly. Human marriage customs emphasize romantic love, don't they? Marcus smiled gently. They do. But love isn't something that can be commanded or arranged. It's something that grows between people who respect and understand each other. I can't promise that we'll fall in love, but I can promise that I'll give that possibility every chance to develop. The sound of raised voices from the ballroom interrupted their conversation. Baron Kelth's influence was clearly expanding, and King Aldrich's patience was evidently running thin. We need to move, Prince Dex urged. Whatever you're planning, Captain, it needs to happen now. Marcus nodded and straightened his diplomatic uniform. Princess Zara, I'm about to ask you a question that will probably shock everyone in that ballroom. Before I do, I need to know that you're truly willing to take this risk. Zara looked out at the stars one final time, then turned back to him with resolution in her violet eyes. Captain Chen, I've spent 5 years being ignored, dismissed, and traded like merchandise. The idea of being valued for who I am rather than what I represent is worth any risk. Then let's go challenge some traditions. They entered the ballroom to find it buzzing with tension. Baron Kelth stood near King Aldrich, clearly in the middle of making his case for immediate action. Several other noble families had gathered nearby, their expressions ranging from concern to malicious amusement at House Viridian's predicament. There she is, Baron Kelth announced loudly, as he spotted their entrance. Your Majesty, as I was explaining, your daughter's behavior tonight has created a situation that requires immediate resolution. King Aldrich's blue skin had darkened to an almost navy shade with anger and embarrassment. Zara, explain yourself. You disappear from the ceremony with an alien representative, causing gossip and speculation about your conduct. Father, Zara began, but Marcus stepped forward before she could continue. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet ballroom, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about this evening's events." King Aldrich looked at him with barely contained fury. "Human, you will not address me unless given permission. Your people's presence here is a courtesy, not a right." "Of course, Your Majesty. I apologize for the breach of protocol." Marcus maintained his diplomatic composure despite the insult. "However, I believe the situation requires clarification from the United Earth Confederation's perspective." Dr. Kim and Commander Rodriguez had noticed the commotion and moved closer, ready to support their captain. The entire ballroom was now focused on the unfolding drama. Baron Kelth sensed the shift in attention and pressed his advantage. "Your Majesty, the humans' involvement in this matter is precisely the problem. Your daughter's reputation has been compromised by inappropriate association with a representative of a minor, insignificant species. The insult to humanity was deliberate and calculated to provoke a response that would further damage Zara's position. But Marcus had spent years in diplomatic situations, and he recognized the trap. Baron Kelth raises an interesting point about the significance of different species," Marcus said calmly. "It's true that humanity is relatively new to galactic politics. We don't have vast military fleets or control extensive economic networks." The Baron smiled triumphantly, thinking he had won. "However," Marcus continued, "we do have something that seems to be in short supply in this gathering: genuine respect for individual choice and personal dignity." A murmur ran through the crowd. Several younger nobles looked intrigued while the older generation appeared scandalized. King Aldrich's voice was dangerously quiet. "Human, you will cease this disruption immediately." "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, "I'm afraid I cannot do that. You see, I have come to make a formal proposal that requires your consideration." The ballroom fell completely silent. Even Baron Kelth looked surprised by this turn of events. Captain Marcus Chen, representing the United Earth Confederation, formally requests the honor of Princess Zara's hand in marriage. The explosion of shocked voices that followed was immediate and overwhelming. Nobles from across the galaxy began speaking at once, their reactions ranging from outrage to fascination. King Aldrich stared at Marcus as if he had lost his mind. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious, Your Majesty. Under galactic law, any representative of a recognized political entity may make such a proposal. The United Earth Confederation has been formally recognized by the Galactic Council." Dr. Kim stepped forward to support her captain. "The legal precedent is clear, Your Majesty. The proposal must be considered according to established protocols." Baron Kelth's expression had shifted from triumph to fury. "This is ridiculous. Humans have no standing in noble society. They're barely above primitives." "Actually," a new voice interjected, "the legal status is quite clear." Everyone turned to see Ambassador Valdris of the Galactic Council's Legal Arbitration Division approaching. As the evening's official protocol observer, her word carried considerable weight. "The United Earth Confederation holds full member status," Ambassador Valdris continued. "Captain Chen's proposal is legally valid and must be given the same consideration as any other formal request." King Aldrich looked trapped between competing pressures. Baron Kelth was clearly expecting immediate dismissal of the human proposal, but legal protocol demanded consideration. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, pressing his advantage, "I understand that this is unexpected. Perhaps Princess Zara should be allowed to express her own thoughts on the matter. It was a calculated risk." By suggesting that Zara should have a voice in her own marriage, Marcus was challenging one of the fundamental assumptions of noble society. But he was also forcing King Aldrich to either publicly acknowledge his daughter's right to choose or explicitly state that she had no such right. All eyes turned to Princess Zara, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. Marcus could see the internal struggle in her expression as she weighed her words carefully. Finally, she spoke, her voice clear and carrying across the silent ballroom. "Father, 5 years ago I spoke for the rights of beings who had no voice in their own fate. Tonight I would like to speak for myself." King Aldrich's expression suggested he already knew he wouldn't like what came next. "Captain Chen's proposal honors me greatly," Zara continued. "More than that, it offers me something I had given up hope of finding: a partnership based on mutual respect rather than political calculation. The ballroom erupted in chaos as the implications of her words sank in. Princess Zara, who had been written off as unmarriageable, was publicly accepting a proposal from a species most nobles considered beneath their notice. But Marcus was watching King Aldrich's face, and what he saw there wasn't just anger. There was also calculation. The king was realizing that his daughter's acceptance might offer advantages he hadn't initially considered. The political game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The political calculation, King Aldrich stood frozen in the center of the ballroom chaos, his mind racing through the political implications of his daughter's unexpected acceptance. The initial shock was giving way to a deeper analysis of what this proposal could mean for House Viridian's future. Baron Kelth stepped closer, his metallic features twisted with rage. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot seriously consider this farce. The girl has lost her mind." "Actually," said a cultured voice from the crowd, "I find the proposal rather intriguing." The speaker was Lord Thylon of the Andromedian courts, one of the most influential nobles in the galaxy. His interest in the proceedings immediately elevated their importance beyond mere scandal. "Lord Thylon," King Aldrich acknowledged warily, "I wasn't aware you were following these developments. How could I not? This is the most interesting political maneuvering I've seen in decades." Lord Thylon moved closer, his elegant form drawing attention from across the ballroom, a representative of a minor species making a formal proposal to a major house's daughter. The precedent alone is fascinating. Baron Kelth's voice was strained with barely controlled anger. "My lord, surely you don't support this disruption of proper order." "I support anything that demonstrates creative thinking and strategic innovation," Lord Thylon replied smoothly. "Tell me, Captain Chen, what exactly is the United Earth Confederation prepared to offer House Viridian in exchange for this alliance?" It was a crucial question, and Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the ballroom upon him. King Aldrich was clearly waiting for this answer as well, his political instincts finally engaging with the situation. "Lord Thylon, Your Majesty," Marcus began, "humanity's offer isn't based on traditional measurements of wealth or military power. We offer something far more valuable in the long term, genuine innovation and the kind of adaptive thinking that comes from a species that has had to earn everything through merit rather than inheritance." "Elaborate?" King Aldrich commanded, his tone suggesting genuine interest for the first time. Marcus gestured to Dr. Kim, who stepped forward with a data pad. "In the past century, humanity has developed revolutionary approaches to terraforming, resource management, and what we call social technology, the art of creating systems that benefit everyone involved rather than just the powerful." "Social technology?" Lord Thylon repeated, clearly intrigued. "The ability to build coalitions based on mutual benefit rather than force or traditional hierarchy," Dr. Kim explained. "Earth's expansion into space has been successful precisely because we've created alliances with species that the major houses have overlooked or dismissed." King Aldrich's expression was thoughtful. "You're talking about the Outer Rim treaties," among others, Marcus confirmed. 17 different species have joined our confederation voluntarily, contributing their unique strengths to shared goals. Our combined economic output now exceeds several of the traditional minor houses. "Impossible," Baron Kelth snarled. "Humans have no real power base." "That's where you're wrong," said another voice from the crowd. Ambassador Chen of the Tau Ceti Trading Collective stepped forward, her insectoid features animated with excitement. "The Human Confederation has become our most reliable trading partner. Their approach to commerce is refreshingly honest." More voices joined the conversation as representatives from various minor houses and newer species began speaking up. The Reptilian Free Cities, the Binary Star Technocracy, the Oceanic Worlds Alliance, all voiced support for humanity's diplomatic approach. King Aldrich was clearly recalculating the political landscape as he listened. What had seemed like a scandal minutes before was beginning to look like an opportunity to align House Viridian with a rising power block. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "Princess Zara's reputation for moral courage would be an asset rather than a liability in our confederation. The speech she gave 5 years ago is still cited as an inspiration by younger generations across dozens of worlds. That speech brought shame to our house, King Aldrich protested, though his tone lacked conviction. With respect, Your Majesty, that speech demonstrated exactly the kind of principled leadership that builds lasting alliances, Lord Thylin interjected. I've always wondered why House Viridian didn't capitalize on the moral authority it demonstrated. Princess Zara looked stunned. You agreed with what I said? My dear princess, half the younger nobles in the galaxy agreed with what you said. The problem was that your family seemed embarrassed by your courage rather than proud of it. King Aldrich's political instincts were now fully engaged. Lord Thylin, are you suggesting that my daughter's outspoken nature might actually be valuable politically? I'm suggesting that in a galaxy where most young nobles are interchangeable political assets, a princess with genuine principles and the courage to express them is extraordinarily rare and valuable. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the ballroom entrance. A group of young nobles, representatives from the newer generation of various houses, were pushing through the crowd toward the center of the discussion. Princess Zara called out Lady Seraphina of the Cloudwalker dynasty. Is it true that you're considering the human proposal? It is, Zara replied, her confidence growing with each moment of unexpected support. That's wonderful, exclaimed Prince Corvin of the Deep Space Mining Consortium. Finally, someone is choosing partnership over political calculation. Baron Kelth looked around wildly as more and more young nobles expressed enthusiasm for the unprecedented match. His carefully laid plans were crumbling before his eyes. This is chaos, he declared. You're all forgetting the natural order, the importance of tradition. Baron Kelth, Marcus said calmly, I think what we're seeing is evolution rather than chaos. Sometimes traditions need to change to remain relevant. King Aldrich was watching the gathering crowd of younger nobles with keen interest. These were the heirs to major houses, the next generation of galactic leadership, and they were clearly excited by the possibility of change. Captain Chen, the king said slowly, assuming I were to consider your proposal seriously, what would the specific terms of this alliance entail? Marcus felt a surge of hope. King Aldrich was negotiating, which meant he saw potential value in the arrangement. Your Majesty, we propose a true partnership. Princess Zara would retain her royal status and serve as Earth's cultural ambassador to the galactic nobility. House Viridian would gain access to our growing trade networks and technological innovations. Most importantly, this alliance would position your house as a leader in the emerging power structure, rather than a follower of the old one. And my daughter's happiness? The king asked, though his tone suggested political calculation rather than paternal concern. Would be our first priority, Marcus replied firmly. As I mentioned earlier, human marriages are built on mutual respect and the possibility of genuine affection. Princess Zara would be my partner in every sense of the word. King Aldrich looked at his daughter, studying her face carefully. What he saw there, hope, determination, and for the first time in years, genuine happiness seemed to influence his decision. Baron Kelth, he said finally, I believe our previous discussions are no longer relevant. The Baron's expression turned murderous. Your Majesty, you cannot seriously prefer an alliance with primitives over the substantial benefits I've offered. What I prefer, King Aldrich replied coldly, is to see House Viridian aligned with the future, rather than trapped in the past. The king turned to Marcus with newfound respect. Captain Chen, your proposal isn't unexpected, but perhaps that's exactly what House Viridian needs. Princess Zara's face lit up with joy and relief, but Marcus knew the real work was just beginning. They had won the political battle, but now they had to build a relationship that could justify the risks they had both taken. Still, as he looked at the remarkable woman who had just agreed to marry him, Marcus felt optimistic about their chances. After all, they had already accomplished something no one thought possible. They had changed the galaxy's mind about what marriage could be. A new alliance 3 months after the Grand Assembly, Princess Zara stood on the observation deck of the UES Harmony, Earth's newest diplomatic vessel, watching the approach to New Geneva Station, where their wedding ceremony would take place. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of negotiations, cultural exchanges, and getting to know the man who would become her husband. Second thoughts? Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. He had learned to read her expressions well during their courtship period. Not about the marriage, Zara replied, turning to smile at him, but I'll admit I'm nervous about whether we can live up to all the expectations we've created. The wedding had become far more than a personal ceremony. Representatives from 37 different worlds would attend, marking it as the largest interspecies gathering in galactic history. More importantly, 12 minor houses had already announced their intention to follow House Viridian's lead in forming alliances with the Earth Confederation. "We've already exceeded my expectations," Marcus said, moving to stand beside her. 3 months ago, I was just hoping to help one person escape an unwanted marriage. I had no idea we were starting a political revolution. It was true. The Viridian precedent, as galactic media had dubbed it, was reshaping noble society across the galaxy. Young nobles were demanding the right to choose their own marriages, while progressive families were seeking alliances based on shared values, rather than traditional power calculations. Lord Thylan sent another message this morning, Zara mentioned. The Andromedian courts are formally adopting marriage choice protocols for all noble children under the age of 30. And Baron Kelth? Still furious but increasingly irrelevant. 3 of his potential brides have refused his offers in the past month, citing the Viridian standard of marriage equality. Marcus laughed. "I'm not sure how I feel about having a political philosophy named after me." "You should feel proud," Zara said seriously. "What you did that night changed everything for people like me across the galaxy. No more forced marriages. No more treating children like property to be traded for political advantage." The past 3 months had confirmed Marcus's initial assessment of Princess Zara's character. She was brilliant, passionate, and possessed a moral courage that inspired everyone around her. More than that, she had proven to be an exceptional partner in building the new alliance between their peoples. "Speaking of change," Marcus said, "I received confirmation this morning that the Galactic Council is formally recognizing the Earth Confederation as a major political entity. We're being granted a permanent seat on the ruling council." Zara's eyes widened with delight. "Marcus, that's wonderful. Your people must be so proud." "Our people," he corrected gently. "You're about to become an Earth citizen, remember?" The reminder brought a smile to Zara's face. Human citizenship was based on choice and shared values rather than birthright, another concept that was revolutionary in galactic society. She would retain her Viridian royal status while gaining full rights and protections as a member of the Earth Confederation. "Have you heard from your father recently?" Marcus asked. "This morning. He's almost insufferably pleased with himself for arranging such a beneficial alliance." Zara replied with amusement. "He's taken full credit for the political advantages, naturally." King Aldrich had indeed benefited enormously from his daughter's marriage. House Viridian was now the primary intermediary between the established galactic nobility and the rising Earth Confederation. Their mineral wealth was being supplemented by lucrative trading contracts and technological exchanges that had increased their influence dramatically. "And he's not wrong to take credit," Marcus pointed out. "He could have rejected the proposal and forced you to marry Baron Kelth. The fact that he chose to take a risk on an untested alliance shows real political courage." "Or desperation," Zara suggested with a laugh. "I'm not sure he had any good options left." Dr. Kim's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Captain Chen, Princess Zara were receiving incoming transmissions from the wedding guests. Would you like to review the final attendance list?" "Send it to the conference room," Marcus replied. "We'll be right there." As they made their way through the ship's corridors, Zara marveled at the difference between human and traditional alien spacecraft design. Where most galactic vessels emphasize the separation between different ranks and species, human ships were built for collaboration and interaction. Crew members from a dozen different species worked together seamlessly, united by shared goals rather than rigid hierarchy. In the conference room, they found Dr. Kim and Commander Rodriguez reviewing the impressive list of wedding attendees. Lord Thylan would serve as the official witness for the galactic nobility, while Ambassador Chen of the Tau Ceti Collective would represent the newer alliance members. "Any surprises?" Zara asked, scanning the list. "Actually, yes," Dr. Kim replied, highlighting one entry. "Princess Lyra of the Gaseous Nebula Kingdoms has requested permission to attend." Zara looked surprised. "Lyra? But she's supposed to marry Prince Corvin of the Deep Space Mining Consortium next month. According to our intelligence reports, she's having second thoughts about the arrangement," Commander Rodriguez explained. Apparently your example has inspired her to question whether she wants a marriage based on political convenience. Marcus and Zara exchanged glances. The ripple effects of their decision continued to spread throughout galactic society, inspiring changes they had never anticipated. Of course she can attend, Zara said. Everyone should have the chance to see what marriage choice looks like. Speaking of which, Marcus added, have we heard anything from the younger nobles who were so supportive at the Grand Assembly? Dr. Kim nodded enthusiastically. That's the best news. 17 young nobles from major houses have announced their intention to follow the Viridian precedent in their own marriages. They're calling themselves the Choice Coalition and lobbying for formal changes to galactic marriage law. Unintended consequences, Marcus murmured, though he looked pleased rather than concerned. The best kind, Zara agreed. We wanted to challenge an unjust system, and now that system is actually changing. As they continued reviewing the preparations, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that night at the Grand Assembly. What had begun as an impulsive decision to help someone in distress had evolved into a genuine partnership that was reshaping galactic politics. More importantly, what had started as a marriage of political convenience was becoming something deeper. The mutual respect and shared values they had hoped for were developing into genuine affection and partnership. Marcus found himself looking forward to their life together not just as political allies, but as companions who understood and challenged each other. Final question before the ceremony, he said as they finished their preparations. Any regrets? Zara considered the question seriously before answering. Only one. I regret that it took 5 years of isolation and despair before I found the courage to choose my own path. And now I'm excited to see what happens when two people build a marriage based on mutual respect, shared values, and unlimited possibilities. She smiled at him with the warmth that had grown between them over the past months. I'm ready to start our adventure, Marcus. As the UES Harmony approached New Geneva Station, where representatives from across the galaxy waited to witness a ceremony that would formally unite two very different species in marriage and alliance, Marcus felt the same excitement. They were about to prove that love and respect could triumph over political calculation, that individuals could choose their own destinies despite social pressure, and that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships could change the galaxy. The wedding of Princess Zara and Captain Marcus Chen would be remembered not just as a romantic story, but as the moment when galactic society began to embrace the radical idea that every sentient being deserved the right to choose their own happiness. And in the years that followed, as their partnership continued to inspire political and social change throughout the galaxy, their marriage became proof that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with a simple act of human kindness. Asking someone to dance when everyone else has ignored them, and discovering that what makes someone different is exactly what makes them extraordinary.